There is a moment most men remember, not because it was dramatic, but because it was confusing. You did everything right. You listened, you showed up, you explained yourself clearly, you were consistent, emotionally available, reliable, and yet something slipped away. At first it was subtle. Her energy changed. Replies became slower. Conversations felt polite instead of alive. Nothing was wrong, but nothing was right either. Then someone else appeared. He did not explain more than you. He did not try harder than you. From the outside, it looked like he was doing less. And still, something shifted. Her attention sharpened. Her energy returned. Attraction reignited almost effortlessly. That moment is where most men break internally. Not because they lost her, but because they lost their logic. They ask the same questions again and again. How is this possible? How can effort lose? What did he do that I did not? Here is the uncomfortable truth. Attraction does not respond to effort the way success, money, or status do. It never has. It responds to psychological states, not visible sacrifice. What you experienced was not bad luck. It was not timing. And it was not that you were too good. It was a mismatch between what you were taught and how attraction actually works. Most men are raised inside an effort-based belief system. Work harder, explain more, be more available, prove your value. This logic works in careers. It works in skill building. It works in survival. But in attraction, effort without the right internal structure creates pressure, not desire. The more you try to secure the outcome, the more unstable the dynamic becomes. Not consciously, psychologically. Women rarely leave because they feel unsafe. They leave because they stop feeling engaged, because they stop feeling chosen, because the connection stops feeling alive. And here is the part no one tells you. Most women cannot clearly explain why this happens either. Not because they are hiding the truth, but because these reactions occur below language, below intention, below logic. This video is not about tricks. It is not about manipulation, and it is not about becoming distant, arrogant, or emotionally closed. It is about understanding the psychological needs that quietly shape attraction and learning how to embody them without pretending, performing, or losing your identity. Over the next 30 minutes, we will break down the deeper dynamics that decide attraction, not from theory, from behavior, perception, and emotional reality. You will see why care alone is never enough, why stability can still feel boring, why agreement weakens presence, why silence can be louder than words, and why the man who seems least invested often holds the most power in the dynamic. If you are looking for reassurance, this video is not for you. But if you want clarity, self-respect, and grounded confidence that does not need to be proven, stay with me. Let us begin with the first illusion most men never question. Number 1, the core illusion. Why effort feels logical but fails psychologically. Most men believe effort creates attraction because effort creates results everywhere else. You work harder, you get better. You invest more, you earn more. You sacrifice, you progress. This logic is rewarded in careers, in training, in survival itself. So when attraction feels uncertain, the instinct is simple. Do more, explain more, show up more, prove more. Psychologically, this is where the illusion begins. Attraction does not respond to visible effort. It responds to internal states. Effort signals intention, but states signal value. When effort is driven by calm self-assurance, it feels grounded. When effort is driven by outcome attachment, it creates pressure. Pressure is not interpreted as care, it is interpreted as instability. Here is what most men miss. The nervous system does not evaluate how much you give. It evaluates how you are while giving. A man who tries to secure attraction through effort communicates one thing beneath the surface. He is not certain. He is not anchored. He needs the outcome to feel stable. That need leaks even when his words sound confident. Consider a simple example. One man texts frequently. He checks in. He reassures. He explains where he stands. He believes consistency will build safety. Another man texts less, but when he does, he is present. He is decisive. He does not chase responses or fill silence. On paper, the first man is doing more. Psychologically, the second man feels heavier. His presence has weight because it is not trying to hold anything together. This is why effort often backfires. Not because effort is wrong, but because effort used to manage uncertainty amplifies it. The more you try to lock the outcome, the more fragile the dynamic becomes. Attraction begins to feel managed rather than experienced. Alive turns into predictable. Curiosity turns into familiarity. The common mistake is assuming attraction faded because you did not do enough. In reality, it faded because you did too much from the wrong place. Effort used to compensate for internal doubt does not create security. It exposes it. The lesson here is simple, but uncomfortable. Attraction is not built by increasing output. It is built by stabilizing the source. When your sense of self is intact without the outcome, your actions feel chosen, not necessary. That difference is felt immediately, even if it is never spoken. This is the foundation everything else rests on. Once effort stops being a tool to earn value, something shifts. Care changes tone. Presence gains weight. Desire becomes possible again. And that leads directly into the next illusion most men never separate. The belief that caring deeply and being desired are the same thing. They are not. Number 2, desire versus care. The difference that decides everything. Most men assume that if they care deeply enough, desire will naturally follow. That assumption feels moral. It feels mature. It feels right. Psychologically, it is incomplete. Care and desire are not the same signal. They are processed in different systems. Care creates comfort. Desire creates energy. Care says, you are safe. Desire says, you are chosen. A relationship can survive on care for a long time. It cannot stay alive on care alone. When a woman feels cared for, she relaxes. When she feels desired, she engages. Engagement is what sustains attraction. Without it, connection becomes functional, polite, predictable. Here is the subtle shift most men miss. Care is often expressed through reassurance, through availability, through emotional accommodation. Desire is expressed through presence, through decisiveness, through attention that is focused, not scattered. Care asks, are you okay? Desire states, I see you. Consider a familiar scenario. One man listens carefully. He validates every emotion. He reassures consistently. He believes emotional safety will deepen attraction. Another man listens as well, but he does not rush to soothe. He maintains eye contact. He pauses before responding. He allows silence to exist. His attention is deliberate. He does not perform concern. He embodies interest. Both men care. Only one creates desire. The difference is not intensity, it is orientation. Care oriented toward maintaining harmony feels supportive. Care oriented toward securing approval feels heavy. Desire does not explain itself. It does not negotiate. It exists calmly without urgency. When desire is rooted in self-assurance, it feels respectful. When it is rooted in insecurity, it feels invasive. The most common mistake is trying to turn care into desire by increasing volume. More reassurance, more compliments, more availability. This does not work. Desire weakens when it feels managed. Attraction fades when it feels guaranteed. The lesson here is precise. Care should be the foundation. Desire should be the current. One provides safety, the other creates movement. When care replaces desire, the relationship becomes stable but flat. When desire exists without desperation, connection stays alive. Once you understand this distinction, behavior naturally changes. Attention becomes intentional. Words become fewer but heavier. Presence replaces performance. And from here, another problem begins to surface. Even when desire is present, attraction still fades if emotional energy never moves. Which brings us to the next principle, emotional rhythm, and why predictability quietly kills curiosity. Number 3, emotional rhythm. Why predictability kills curiosity. Stability is necessary. Sameness is not. Most men confuse the two. They believe that if they remain emotionally consistent, attraction will feel safe and therefore last. Psychologically, safety without movement becomes background noise. The nervous system adapts. Attention fades. Curiosity disappears. Attraction requires motion. Not chaos, not drama, motion. Emotional rhythm is the variation in energy, focus, and expression that keeps interaction alive. A man who feels emotionally identical every day becomes reliable but invisible. There is nothing for attention to hold on to. Consider a common pattern. Conversations follow the same structure, the same tone, the same emotional temperature. Depth is constant. Seriousness is constant. Availability is constant. Nothing is wrong. Nothing is memorable either. Contrast this with a man who allows natural shifts. Some days he is playful. Some days he is focused. Some days he is quiet. He does not explain the change. He does not apologize for it. He simply allows life to move. This is where curiosity lives. The mind engages when it cannot fully predict emotional texture, not because it feels unsafe, but because it feels alive. Rhythm creates contrast. Contrast creates attention. Attention sustains attraction. The mistake many men make is mistaking rhythm for unpredictability. They believe variation means inconsistency. It does not. Emotional rhythm rests on a stable core. Values do not change. Integrity does not change. Direction does not change. What changes is expression, energy, tone. Another error is overusing depth. Constant seriousness feels heavy. Depth without lightness creates emotional fatigue. Playfulness, humor, and ease are not distractions. They are relief. They allow attraction to breathe. The lesson is simple. Stability is the foundation. Rhythm is the spark. When emotional energy never moves, attraction has nowhere to go. When rhythm exists naturally, engagement stays alive without effort. And once emotional rhythm is established, another weakness often reveals itself. Many men maintain harmony by abandoning their own perspective, which leads us to the next principle, independent thinking, and why agreement feels safe but weak. Number 4, independent thought. Why agreement feels safe but weak. Agreement creates short-term harmony. It lowers friction. It avoids tension. For many men, this feels like emotional intelligence. Psychologically, constant agreement communicates absence. When you remove your perspective to preserve peace, you also remove presence. Attraction does not grow in a vacuum. A woman is not drawn to someone who mirrors her thoughts back to her. She is drawn to someone who stands comfortably in his own. Independent thought is not opposition. It is expression. It is the calm ability to say, "This is how I see it," without needing approval or conflict. Consider how this plays out. One man nods. He aligns automatically. He adjusts his views to match the room. He believes agreement equals connection. Another man listens fully, then offers a different angle. He does not argue. He does not persuade. He simply states his perspective with clarity and calm. The first man feels agreeable. The second man feels real. The fear beneath agreement is simple. If I disagree, I might lose connection. Psychologically, the opposite often happens. Calm disagreement creates engagement. It signals confidence. It signals independence. It signals that your sense of self exists without external validation. The mistake is turning disagreement into debate. Independent thought does not require intensity. It requires grounding. When disagreement is delivered without emotional charge, it feels safe. It invites exploration rather than resistance. The lesson here is precise. Attraction is strengthened by respectful tension, not conflict, not dominance. Tension created by two intact perspectives in the same space. When you erase your view to maintain comfort, you also erase the spark that curiosity needs. Once a man stands in his own thinking, something subtle changes. Respect deepens. Attention sharpens. But even with independent thought, attraction can still feel flat if the interaction lacks something unspoken. Which brings us to the next principle, the quiet spark that lives beneath words, and why presence matters more than explanation. Number 5, the quiet spark. What happens beneath words. Attraction is rarely created by what is said. It is created by what is felt in the space between words. This is where many interactions fail. They sound correct, they feel polite, they are emotionally clean, and yet they leave no imprint. When the quiet spark is missing, connection stays friendly, respectful, and forgettable. The quiet spark is not intensity. It is not sexual escalation. It is not constant affirmation. It is presence. Calm, grounded, unforced presence. It lives in eye contact that is steady without staring, in pauses that are comfortable, not rushed, in silence that is allowed to exist without being filled. Consider two conversations with the same content. In the first, the man speaks quickly. He fills every gap. He explains himself fully. He avoids silence as if it were a mistake. In the second, the man speaks less. He maintains eye contact. When she finishes speaking, he waits, a second longer than necessary. He responds slowly, with intention. Nothing explicit changes. Everything underneath does. The nervous system notices this immediately. Silence creates space. Space invites awareness. Awareness deepens emotion. When every moment is filled with words, there is no room for feeling to surface. The interaction stays on the surface because nothing is allowed to sink. Proximity matters as well. Too much distance feels disconnected. Too much closeness feels intrusive. Natural closeness, without constant adjustment, communicates confidence. It says, "I am comfortable here." That comfort is felt. Voice matters too. A controlled pace signals grounding. Slightly slower speech during meaningful moments adds weight. Words land differently when they are not rushed. The most common mistake is trying to manufacture this spark through technique. Forced eye contact, artificial pauses, performative silence. This never works. The spark cannot be faked. It emerges naturally when a man is not trying to manage perception, when he is simply present in his body, aware, unhurried, and grounded. The lesson is clear. Attraction deepens when less is done, but more is allowed. Presence amplifies meaning. Silence reveals emotion. One grounded moment carries more weight than 1,000 correct sentences. And once this quiet spark exists, another truth becomes impossible to ignore. Even the strongest presence collapses if it is driven by emotional dependence. Which brings us to the next principle, emotional independence, and why wanting attracts while needing repels. Number 6, emotional independence. Why wanting attracts and needing repels. Attraction begins to collapse the moment a woman becomes the center of a man's emotional stability. This is not about distance. It is about balance. Wanting someone is an expression of choice. Needing someone is an expression of dependency. Psychologically, these two signals are processed very differently. Wanting feels light. It says, "I choose you because my life is already grounded." Needing feels heavy. It says, "I require you to feel okay." The nervous system reacts to this immediately. One creates openness, the other creates pressure. Look at how this shows up in real life. One man rearranges his entire schedule to be available. He cancels plans. He pauses goals. He waits for responses. He believes devotion proves value. Another man maintains his direction. He keeps commitments. He shows up when he chooses to, not because he has nothing else. Both men may care equally. Only one feels emotionally stable. The mistake is confusing availability with intimacy. Constant access does not deepen connection. It weakens polarity. When your presence is guaranteed, it loses meaning. When your presence is chosen, it carries weight. Attraction thrives when attention feels intentional, not compulsory. Emotional independence does not mean withholding care. It means your sense of self does not rise and fall with someone else's reactions. You remain centered whether the response is warm or distant. That steadiness communicates strength, not dominance, stability. The most common fear is this: if I stop centering her, I will lose her. In reality, centering her is often what causes the loss. Neediness creates emotional labor. Self-sufficiency creates ease. Ease allows attraction to breathe. The lesson here is quiet but decisive. Be okay without the outcome. When your emotional state does not depend on being chosen, your presence feels chosen. This is the paradox most men miss. And once emotional independence is in place, another quality naturally emerges: direction. The ability to lead without force, to decide without anxiety, to create safety without control. Which brings us to the next principle: quiet leadership and the kind of certainty that allows others to relax. Number 7, quiet leadership, the safety no one talks about. Leadership that creates attraction is rarely loud. It does not announce itself. It does not seek validation. It is felt through composure, direction, and consistency under pressure. Quiet leadership creates a specific kind of safety, not the safety of predictability, but the safety of capability. This form of leadership begins with certainty. Not certainty that everything will go perfectly, but certainty that you can handle what happens when it does not. A man who reacts calmly to disruption communicates something powerful. He is not dependent on conditions being ideal. His stability comes from within. Watch how this appears in ordinary moments. Plans change unexpectedly. A delay happens. Something goes wrong. One man hesitates. He asks repeatedly what others want to do. He looks for reassurance before acting. Another man pauses, assesses, and decides. He does not rush. He does not over-explain. He adjusts direction and moves forward. Nothing dramatic happens, but tension dissolves. Quiet leadership is not control. It is responsibility. It means making decisions without emotional volatility. It means knowing when to act and when to wait. It also means knowing when to leave, when to rest, and when to say no. Boundaries are part of leadership. They communicate self-respect without confrontation. The mistake many men make is believing leadership requires dominance or assertiveness at all times. It does not. Overcompensation creates resistance. Excessive explanation creates doubt. Leadership loses strength when it seeks permission. The lesson is subtle. When you carry direction calmly, others relax. When others relax, trust forms. When trust forms, emotional openness becomes possible. Attraction deepens not because you demanded attention, but because your presence removed uncertainty. And once leadership is felt, another dynamic becomes unavoidable. Attention begins to carry weight. Approval begins to matter. Validation becomes meaningful only when it is not automatic. Which brings us to the final principle: selective validation, and why self-respect decides emotional investment. Number 8, selective validation. Why approval must be earned to matter. Valid is powerful, but only when it has weight. When approval is constant, unconditional, and predictable, it loses value. Psychologically, the nervous system adapts. What is always available is no longer felt. Appreciation that requires nothing carries nothing. Many men overvalidate because they believe reassurance creates security. Compliments are frequent. Praise is automatic. Approval is guaranteed. This feels generous. In reality, it removes tension. Without tension, attention fades. Attraction does not grow where everything is already given. Selective validation communicates standards. It signals that appreciation is a response, not a default. When you acknowledge behavior, values, or effort that align with who you are, your approval feels grounded. It feels earned. That weight changes how it is received. Consider a simple contrast. One man praises everything. Every action is met with affirmation. There is no distinction between alignment and misalignment. Another man remains warm, but selective. He notices what matters to him. He acknowledges it calmly. When something does not align, he does not punish. He simply remains neutral. The first man feels kind. The second man feels valuable. The mistake is confusing selectivity with coldness. Selective validation is not withholding. It is clarity. It means you do not overreact to inconsistency. You do not chase repair through praise. You remain steady. Your approval becomes meaningful because it reflects self-respect. The deeper fear is losing interest if validation is reduced. Psychologically, the opposite often occurs. When approval is not automatic, attention sharpens. Investment increases, not through anxiety, but through awareness. The lesson is direct. Value your time. Value your attention. Value your standards. When you do, your approval carries signal. Respect becomes mutual. Attraction deepens naturally. And now, everything comes together. Desire without desperation. Rhythm without instability. Presence without performance. Independence without detachment. Leadership without control. Validation without neediness. Which brings us to the final integration. Why attraction is not a strategy, but a state you live in. Number 9, integration. Why attraction is a state, not a strategy. Up to this point, each principle may appear separate. Effort, desire, rhythm, presence, independence, leadership, validation. But attraction does not respond to isolated behaviors. It responds to coherence. When these qualities align inside one man, attraction stops feeling forced and starts feeling inevitable. This is where most men fail quietly. They treat attraction as a checklist. Say less, pause more, lead calmly, validate selectively. On the surface, the behaviors look correct. Beneath them, the state is anxious. The nervous system senses the mismatch immediately. Techniques performed without internal alignment feel hollow. They collapse under pressure. Attraction is not created by doing the right thing at the right moment. It is created by being the same person across moments. When desire is not tied to outcome, when independence does not require distance, when leadership does not need control, when presence does not need explanation. This is a state, not a tactic. Consider two men who know the same principles. One applies them when he feels confident and abandons them when he feels threatened. His behavior changes with the outcome. The other lives them regardless of response. His tone remains grounded whether attention is given or withdrawn. One feels strategic, the other feels solid. Only one creates lasting attraction. The integration happens when effort is no longer used to earn value, but to express it. Care exists without replacing desire. Rhythm exists without instability. Silence exists without tension. Approval exists without dependence. Nothing is exaggerated. Nothing is withheld. Everything is clean. The final mistake is using psychological understanding to manipulate perception. Insight without integrity leads to control. Control creates short-term results and long-term damage. Attraction sustained through performance eventually demands exhaustion. Attraction rooted in state requires nothing to maintain. The lesson is simple and final. Stop trying to become attractive. Start becoming stable. When your internal structure is intact, your presence carries weight automatically. Attention responds. Respect follows. Attraction forms without being chased. And from here, the conversation changes. Not about how to get someone, but about how to live in a way that no longer requires proving. That is where real confidence begins.